I recently came across a really interesting study from the Financial Health Network and Gen Forward about race, ethnicity, and the financial lives of young adults. When it comes to ending systemic racism, we all have to do our part. And for me, I promise to bring about financial awareness that impacts everyone of all races. I thought this study did a really good job in presenting that, so here's what I found out. Hey, what's up guys? It's Justine with Debt Free Millennials, the channel to help you crush your debt and live payment free. I really liked this study a lot because it talks specifically about young adults. So it included Gen Zs and Millennials in this study. So this was a national study of 3,000 participants ages 18 to 36. The study found that majority of respondents have a financial precariousness. Now, precariousness means the dangerous likelihood of falling or collapsing, which is kind of crazy when we're thinking about our personal finances. But even more so, Black and Latinx young adults have more challenges ahead of them for their finances, more so than whites and Asian Americans. Okay, so the report had 4 key findings that I wanted to share with you. Number 1, Black and Latinx young adults have less liquid savings than their white and Asian American counterparts. This means that in an emergency or an unexpected event, that Black and Latinx young adults don't have as much cushion or savings to fall back on like whites and Asian Americans. Number 2, Black and Latinx young adults are more likely to say that they have unmanageable and high-cost debt compared to white and Asian Americans. This means that Black and Latinx young adults are less likely to have access to low-cost debt and continue to build wealth. Number 3, the racial wealth gap has denied Black and Latinx young adults the ability to build wealth through generational transfers from their family. Number 4, there is a large confidence gap between Latinx young adults and Black, white, and Asian Americans when it comes to long-term financial goals and insurance coverage. Okay, so the key findings really point to Black and Latinx young adults having a disadvantage financially when compared to white and Asian Americans. Now, the study used 8 indicators of financial health. So take a look on screen. The indicators included, number 1, spend less than your income. Number 2, pay bills on time. 3, have sufficient liquid savings. 4, have sufficient long-term savings. 5, have manageable debt. 6, have a prime credit score. 7, have appropriate insurance. And 8, plan ahead financially. All of these indicators were compiled through a survey and given out to participants where they could easily kind of check the box and tell us exactly what was going on in their financial lives. So let's start with the first indicator. Okay, so the first indicator is spend less than what you're bringing in, spend less than your income. Indicator number 2 is the ability to pay your bills on time. So survey participants were asked, how often is it that you are unable to pay your bills on time? 53% of Black young adults and 57% of Latinx adults said that they were unable to pay all bills on time. Also, the worry about paying unexpected bills of $1,000, 40% of Blacks and 37% were extremely or very worried about paying an unexpected bill of $1,000, while only 33 and 27% of whites and Asian Americans were worried about this type of expense. let's not forget about the impacts of the pandemic. Take a look at these charts. Here is the impact of the pandemic on employment. 27 and 26% of Black and Latinx young adults lost their job. Many had hours cut, many were furloughed or on temporary leave, and then thinking about the impact of the pandemic on expenses, which expenses actually made it challenging for them to pay? Well, 31% of both Black and Latinx young adults said it was a challenge for them to pay rent. 25% of Latinx said it was challenging for them to pay their credit cards. 28% of Latinx for their utility bills. And then 25% of Black young adults made it challenging to pay for meals or groceries. Now you can see it's pretty obvious that in all of these categories, either whites or Asian Americans had the least amount of impact. Okay, indicator number 3 talks about sufficient savings. Check out this chart. This says at your current level of spending, how long could you and your household afford to cover expenses without withdrawing money from retirement accounts or borrowing? So 56% of Black young adults said that they had less than 3 months of living expenses and liquid savings, compared to just 32% of Asian Americans. And speaking of Asian Americans, they actually had an overwhelming 61% had said that they had $5,000 or more in their personal savings account, compared to 44% of whites, 40% of Latinx young adults, and 31% of Black young adults. Okay, indicator number 4 talks about long-term savings. In this section, they talked about the confidence of saving for their long-term financial goals and how likely somebody would be able to achieve that, and also the ownership of a retirement plan or a pension. 64% of Latinx young adults said they were somewhat, slightly, or not at all confident in their long-term financial goals. But it's interesting to see that in this question, literally every single race, more than half had agreed that somewhat, slightly, or not at all confident about their long-term financial goals. Then 35% of both Black and Latinx young adults said they don't have a retirement plan or a pension. Now, given that there were 18-year-olds in this study, maybe that's actually not something that we can use really, because as an 18-year-old, I definitely didn't have a retirement plan or a pension. So maybe that could be skewing the data a little bit, because I feel like most people will have access to retirement plans and pension plans after college. But here and again, maybe not all of these participants had access to college. We'll talk about that too. All right, number 5, the indicator number 5, let's talk about manageable debt. 31% of Black young adults said that they have debt that is unmanageable and overwhelming. 28% of Latinx young adults agreed to this. 22% of whites and 17% of Asian Americans said that they have more debt than what is manageable. Okay, so this is really interesting because they also asked participants what types of debt that they had. 34%, so majority of whites had car loans. 36% of Asian Americans had mortgages, compared to just 19% of Black young adults. Past due medical bills were owed by a majority of Black and Latinx young adults, compared to whites and Asian Americans. And then you'll also see outstanding credit card balances, 26% of Latinx and 25% from Blacks, and then other debts or loans, majority coming from Blacks when compared to Latinx, white, or Asian American. But wait, let's not forget about student loan debt, because that's something that I feel like a lot of us have had to deal with. 36% of Black young adults have more student loan debt than is manageable. And then also total amount of student loan debt, less than $10,000, there was about 25% each from Black and Latinx young adults. More than $10,000, which I feel like a lot of us will fall into that range. 30% of Black young adults, compared to just 26% of whites and 24% of Asian Americans, and then 25% from Latinx young adults. Indicator number 6 talked about a prime credit score and the ability to really build that up to a good credit score so that you can qualify for different types of loans. Now, me personally, what I say on this channel is the only time I really care about a credit score is when I'm thinking about buying a home and applying for a mortgage. Also, I think about a credit score when I'm applying for new credit cards, which actually happens very infrequently I don't think it's a good idea to acquire and open new credit cards all the time because that also impacts your credit score. But if you are looking for that, those are kind of the two main features of what I would like to use a credit score for. Otherwise, I'm paying all cash. But get this, 42% agreed that they would rate their credit score fair or poor among Black young adults, compared to 34% of Latinx young adults, and then 19% of whites and 11% of Asian Americans. Now, as millennials, when we were coming of age, this was also happening during the Great Recession, when the job market was just in shambles and we really had a rough head start with our young adult lives. Now, this has also led to us delaying some important life events. Now, this chart talks about the impact of debt on life events. So the question was, has your debt ever caused you to delay any of the following life events? 13% of whites said getting married. That was the highest score from that category. 17% of Latinx young adults said having children. They delayed that. Debt also prevented people from buying a car. 31% of Black young adults and 29% of Latinx young adults agreed with that. Across the board, buying a home for sure. Everybody, and especially Black and Latinx young adults, said that this was true, that debt is preventing them from buying a home. Now, savings for retirement, this is kind of interesting that it was just about even across the board except for Asian Americans, and then continuing your education. So it definitely, everybody is feeling the impact of debt preventing them from moving forward and hitting these life milestones. Indicator number 7 talked about appropriate insurance. Now check out this chart. Chart 20 says confidence about insurance coverage, thinking about the types of insurance you have. How confident are you that these policies will provide enough support? 68% of Latinx young adults said that they weren't confident or do not have insurance. In fact, everybody, more than half of all races across the board in the study, said that they weren't confident or they didn't have insurance. Access to employer provided benefits. Still thinking about your main job. Does your employer offer you any of the following benefits? Now, 50% of Asian Americans said that their employer provided health insurance. 30% said life insurance, and 23% of disability insurance. So it almost seems like what you can gather from this data is that more Asian Americans are working for employers that offer these types of benefits, whereas it looks like Latinx young adults reported the least likely to have these type of benefits from their employers. And the last indicator was planning ahead financially. This chart talked about planning ahead financially. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? My household plans ahead financially. 58% of Latinx young adults do not agree with this statement, compared to 45% of Black young adults, 36% of whites, and 31% of Asian Americans. Okay, so those were the key indicators, and it's very clear that there are discrepancies among Black and Latinx young adults compared to white and Asian Americans. So as an individual person, what can we do about this? What can you do about this to make sure that we have equal access to better financial benefits and better financial health? Well, I think it really starts with coming together to solve economic injustice. We need new government policies that can help us get away from this old school system that really kind of distanced our peers from one another. We also need a government that gives us the same opportunities that were given to previous generations. Out of this survey, 8 solutions were kind of discussed among participants. Number 1, universal job guarantee for all who want to work. Number 2, universal basic income or $1,000 per month to all adults. Number 3, a 2% tax implemented on those with assets over $50 million. And number 4, a 3% tax implemented on those with assets over $1 billion. Number 5, companies need to pay a tax for every worker that they dismiss. sixth place. Number 6, the Green New Deal. Number 7, free tuition at public universities. And number 8, a pathway to citizenship for undocumented individuals. These are just some solutions that came out of the survey. But what was really interesting is that the young adults, the millennials and the Gen Zers who were part of this all had reported that they are pretty optimistic about their financial future on an individual level. They said that they had the confidence and hope and positivity that things were going to get better for them. And when we talk about individual choice, we all have the opportunity to better our condition. And so I thought this was just a really interesting financial survey that came out, because I do think that as a whole, Gen Z and millennials are coming into their adult lives with this disadvantage of having more debt, rising student loan costs, and just dealing with a very hot and crazy housing market and now a car market. And we went through our job market and we started our careers during the Great Recession. And now Gen Z, they're starting their career during a pandemic. So how do we get ahead financially? I think we're all feeling that stress across the board, but even more so for our Black and Latinx peers. And so let's be aware and be mindful. What's one thing that you can personally do to make this a more inclusive world where we have access for everybody and we are recognizing people of all faiths, races, colors, everything in between? Leave me a comment below. Let me know if you are here for this type of content. We are bringing financial awareness that impacts all races. Please consider liking this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.